The first thing that you're going to need to do for this is to create some type of a summary. It needs to be clear that you read the book, that you fully understood it, and that you're also addressing how the writer takes up certain story elements. Now, story elements is something that's probably a review for a lot, if not all of you, but it's been a while, I'm sure. I'll do what I can to plug some additional resources into Schoology if you want a quick refresher, but basically the big ones that we're looking for here, for proficiency at least, is going to be plot, what happens in the story, what are the events. You may remember the plot diagram that you've seen before, Story Mountain. Character, so an analysis of who is in this book, what are their character traits. You may even remember things like indirect characterization and direct characterization, that acronym STEAL that we did with some of you in 6th grade. And then finally, conflict. So what's the problem in the story? Human versus human, human versus nature, human versus self, all those sorts of things. So that's sort of bare minimum for proficiency here. You'll need to make sure that you are addressing those things and also backing up that with evidence. So if you're saying that the main character was cranky, you're going to need to pull out an example from the story where you can prove that yes, he or she was actually cranky, and I'm not just making that up.
Sorry for the abrupt change in scenery. I was rewatching the video and realized that I made a mistake on the rubric, so I'm just going back to cover this part here. Made a little change. So what previously said plot device and figurative and language, I'm just going to change it to literary devices and figurative language because I think the language is a little bit more clear. So as far as literary devices go, if you're looking for what that means, I'll put a link in here, but more commonly what you're going to see are figurative language. So metaphor, simile, things like that. So you want to be looking for that when you are going through your book. You will need to have at least 3 different literary devices or figurative language or a mixture of both. Make sure that you have direct quotes as evidence for each as well. So if you say there's foreshadowing, you've got to actually put in there what the foreshadowing is and why. 4 or more different literary devices with at least 4 direct quotes. So sorry about that. So you can return to my basement library room for the rest of the rubric in 3, 2, 1.
So moving down in theme is one of the big things. Theme is also a story element, but it's super crucial for this assignment, so we're going to consider it as a different criteria than story elements and sort of see it on its own. Remember that theme is going to be the life lesson in the story. It's the message that the author wants you to come away with. What is it that they're trying to teach you? What wisdom are they trying to impart on you? Some of you may remember this. This is a frequent sort of stumbling block for a lot of people, myself included, when we're thinking about theme. So let's say you're reading a story and it's about, you know, a kid who's going through some tough times at school and at home, and he meets a neighbor, and the neighbor is really good friends with him, blah, 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 blah. They help each other through. They're both going through something difficult, and they have the power of friendship. So if you were going to say there that the theme of the story is friendship, that's incorrect. So friendship is not a theme. Friendship is a noun, and at best it is a topic, a subject of your story. Theme has other elements in it. So a theme is going to equal a topic plus a position. So the author's sort of perspective, their position, what they're trying to say about that topic. So instead, a better one for that hypothetical story about neighbors being friends, let's call that book Friends That Are Friends but Also Are Neighbors, the book. So for a theme statement there, theme statement should be, usually it's just 1 sentence. I suppose it could be 2 if your 1 sentence is really clunky, but make sure that you have the topic and the position. So in this case, with that synopsis that I gave you, theme statement could be, you know, through the power of friendship, everyone can overcome hardships. Pretty cheesy, pretty dumb. For proficiency, you should have at least one specific quote from the book. And then for exemplary, again, maybe the theme is a little bit more sophisticated, I guess. The wording that you use for it, it's a little bit more specific. You want to make sure that your theme doesn't apply to like every single story in the world. You don't want it to be super broad, but you don't want it to be so specific that maybe it just covers the beginning of the book instead of the end, because stories would have a lot of different not right lessons if you just focused on the beginning without how the story ends. So just make sure that it covers the entire thing, but at the same time it's not so broad that it's meaningless and could fit for virtually any story that you've got. So this is going to be a big one here for illustrations. I, again, keep saying this, but I've got resources that you can click on today that'll take you through some vocabulary for discussing illustrations, discussing visuals, discussing art. Talking about, you know, is this watercolor or is this digital art? How can you tell the difference? Things like that. You'll have some access to some resources that should help you with that. So for illustrations, you want to make sure that you're talking about the style of the illustration and the function. So, you know, what does it do? Why were these choices made about the illustration style? Are there certain colors that are coming up all the time? And do they have some sort of deeper meaning? Does it connect to the theme? Does it connect to the culture that is being represented in the book? Maybe there's a distinct color palette sort of associated with that place of the world. So you really want to look deeply into this and just always have in your head that every single color was really picked with a lot of thinking and hard, laborious work and choices from the illustrator of this. They didn't just reach into a marker bin and pull out and be like, oh, I guess I'll make it a yellow house or something, you know. There's a reason behind every single choice that an illustrator makes, just like every single author makes those choices. You should talk about two specific examples. I think the easiest way to do that is just by literally taking a photo or scanning, actually, two pieces of art from your book that you really want to pick apart and talk about. Why proficient, two examples, three examples for exemplary on that. And then finally, for students enrolled in the accelerated section, but also for students who are not currently enrolled in the accelerated section, but you might like to in the future, or you would like to work for an E, this is another way you can get yourself some extra points this way. For those of you that are not enrolled in accelerated, you can try to do this target. You'll have access to all that same stuff. And then, you know, you can rack up some extra points on that for e-work. Ideally, every single one of you would be enrolled in accelerated so that you can have access to those AP courses, because I do think that everybody should have access to that and everybody should try to take it, because it can save you a lot of money when college comes, and you know, they're just good classes to take as well for that experience. So okay, you're going to be doing for this a critical lens reading. There are a lot of different things that you can sort of look at for this. There's a lot of different choices and you have some freedom there. Broadly speaking, because there's going to be a couple lessons on this that you'll need to do, but it is choosing a particular perspective, a particular point of view to go through and analyze that text again. I have access to is this document that's actually just all about applying the lenses to illustrations and photos. And here they run through the four main types: social class, gender, feminism, race and ethnicity, and a historical lens too. If you wanted to do some additional research, if you find a book about a particular time in history that's of interest to you, you could talk a little bit about what does this book tell us about this point in time. For an exemplary, for those of you that are in the accelerated section, I'd like you to take up two different critical lenses. So, you know, maybe like a racial bias lens and then a gender lens. Those are things that you can explore. Try to get at least two examples, I would say, but sometimes it might be hard to find more than one, and that would be okay too. As far as, you know, what is this thing that you're going to be making, you get to choose. Adobe Spark Page, Spark Video, you can make an iMovie, like a book talk type thing. The world is your oyster. I would say you could try to make a podcast, but I think that that would be really tough since it's such a visual project. But you just want to try to figure out something where you can work in what those images are, as well as talk about the content of the book. So today, I can't remember if it's an A day or B day, but it'll be due on that Friday for everybody. Friday night at 11:59, November 2nd. If you do not get it into me by 11:59, you will not be able to make any revisions to it. If you do get it into me by 11:59, you'll have the entire next week to make revisions. And if you don't turn it in on time, you got to get it to me by the last day of the quarter. But whatever you get is what you get. Let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to hearing about your books when I see you next. Thanks.